Hello, and welcome to today's session, CIO Live. My name is Chris Holmes, I'm editor at large, and this is part of our Leadership in Technology series. I'm very pleased to welcome Sharon Ung, Ministry Family CIO for MTI at GovTech today. And we're going to be talking about leadership, digital change, and new technology adoption. But before we get into those details, maybe Sharon, you could just give us a little bit about your background and how you became a tech leader.
Sure, sounds good. Hi, Chris. Great to be here. I am a typical com science grad. Love technology at heart, and really started my career as a software engineer, and then kind of moved up to lead large software development teams across the globe, actually. So that's really exciting. Yes, and I've actually took a pause of tech when I was bored, and then actually look at driving and running a business unit for one of the tech companies, and really enjoyed that. And then going back to lead transformation, and did that a couple of years, and now I'm back into the tech space, which is really exciting to lead digital transformation for our smart nation.
That's great to hear. And again, that jump going from sort of a tech vendor back into the end user, and particularly government, that must have been a very interesting move for you.
Oh, very, to say the least. I think one thing that strikes me quite immediately is the rigor actually in the public sector for a lot of the things that the public sector do. They really do go through much rigor and considerations versus if you talk about more of the private sector, where we really want to make decisions and we move a little bit quicker because we don't have that many considerations in terms of risk and national interest. That kind of risk is different. Ours is more dollar and cents. Public sector is more, national interest for citizens and businesses, which is a lot more on the table, at stake, right? Yeah.
And so, I mean, really nice sort of segue into this conversation around leadership. And again, I mean, you talked about sort of leading, global teams, and now you're leading teams in Singapore. So what is it that actually makes a team actually work in your experience?
I think trust, for me. It's really the glue, not just with your immediate teams, but also to be able to remove roadblocks for them ahead. You kind of plan 3 steps ahead, and you look at your stakeholders around you. I think what makes a team is really understanding the what's the purpose, the why we do what we do, and not so much on the what and the how, but if we figure out as a why as a team, I think I really see teams that do well, and high performing teams, they can articulate the why very well for themselves, but also for the organization.
So that really, that sort of communication and that understanding as to where people fit in that bigger picture. Yeah.
And then of course, once you have the trust, so understanding your why and then building the trust. Trust is such a big word as well. It's how do you build trust with people that you don't like or you don't enjoy working with. And in our life we face, right, whether it's your bosses or your colleagues, there will be some people that are just, for some reason chemistry doesn't work as well. So I'll say as leaders, we have to be sensitive to what those are and try to remove those roadblocks. What I call organization barriers, which could be imposed by us because the way we set up the teams on their focus areas, we create competition unnecessarily. But I think I go back to the culture as well, right? I think the culture of the organization and even teams within big organizations may have different cultures across depending on how the leadership impacts the group. And culture is something that you really need to operationalize, and you have to see through action, not just cheap words or just talk about culture all day long, but yet we do something different. So for me and my team, I think that's one of the focus areas that we spend a lot of time on is really identifying what are some of the difficulties in perhaps operationalizing some of these cultures that I was talking about. So in GovTech, we actually have our GovTech Way, which is act with purpose, model empathy, and then develop people. And we make sure that the leaders are living every day those principles, right? Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. And that, I think that modeling the behavior that you want others to follow, I think is something I've been hearing from a lot of leaders I've been speaking to. Don't just say it, but you've actually got to show it.
Yes, show up the way you say we should show up. I think leaders have a tough job really trying to live some of these values if they're not used to it. Yeah.
Excellent. So, okay, so let's sort of move on from that leadership conversation and talk around this notion around digital change. I mean, Singapore is at the forefront of a lot of digital adoption for the citizens and across the city. What actually inspires that digital change? Is it more sort of the business, sort of government pulling through ideas, or is there a technology push where new technologies come up and you're looking for ways to implement them?
Yes, I can offer my perspective. I think for me and my team, and specifically, through COVID, going through COVID times and now, a lot of the digital change are inspired firstly to elevate some business problems that we are seeing or we're trying to solve, whether it's national level or whole government level. It can also be specific to specific function that has. So I think in terms of aspiring change, we need to look at solving the business problems and then being very clear about what outcomes are we trying to drive and measure it, right? I think the second point is really about being clear also. What are we changing from and to, right? So the transformational, rather than there's a new AI technology or there's a new cool hype that comes out with. I remember when blockchain came onto the scene. So what's this blockchain thing? How do I use it? For me, being a technologist, I obviously will be curious how it's solving business problems. How can we use technology to solve business problems versus what we are doing today? If there's a better way of doing it, one step versus 3 steps, or a way that we can actually be more productive in saving time and money on getting our destination faster. I think those will be some of the considerations as we, as to what aspire the change, right? The digital change.
And I think you bring up a really interesting point there as well. And as I say, it's a great lead into the next part of the conversation. And it's something that we've been having a lot of conversation about, which is this notion around how do we actually separate the hype from reality? How do we actually decide which technologies we're going to invest time, we're going to invest effort in, and we're actually going to look to actually introduce into the organization versus some of the claims that are out there that, I mean, you talk about blockchain. I mean, I go back and remember RFID, which was going to sort of fundamentally change everything. And I mean, I'm sure there's a long history of these type of things, but how do you actually put in place processes, and how do you actually make those decisions as to, okay, which technologies warrant further investigation?
Yes. For me, I have a methodology that I use, which really looks at, first of all, the smell test, right? the smell test in terms of whether it is mature enough to be to even warrants, a deeper dive into that. I think cost is also another aspect, right? If it's like, oh, it's really cool, but you know what? It's too costly. It costs an arm and a leg to even try and do any proof of concept. Then that goes out of the window. So technology, there's always going to be new things. The pace of change is just tremendous, right? There's always going to be new innovative technology that comes out, which I think is great, because then if not, it will be such a boring space to be in. But at the same time, those are the two areas, right, which I mentioned. So first of all, the smell test. And how do we do a smell test? It could be as simple as thinking about some of the use cases, whether this can be used. I give you an example. GPT 4.0. There's a lot of talk about ChatGPT, and people have tried using it. I've tried using it. Actually, I thought it's actually quite a useful engine to have. But what we use it for in terms of the use cases is equally important. And technology, at the end of the day, is really just an enabler. It's not something that it will replace. Some folk was sharing with me, oh, do we think that AI will replace some of the jobs, right? They pass the bar exams and medical exams and so forth and so forth. I guess it's relative. Yeah. So for me, once you've done the smell test, I'll invest in a discovery process whereby we actually look at potential use cases that we can actually capitalize on this. And if there's a cost-effective way of actually delivering something that brings value quickly, and we can demonstrate that would be my hype bubble burst, right? That's like actually it's workable. I think it's also sometimes industry problems that we are trying to solve. So like blockchain example, it's very useful for banks, financial institutions. They are the ones who are the first to capitalize on it more than, say, other industries that probably will not think that it is such a big deal, right, for them.
So, I mean, that's an interesting point. So also starting to look at sort of how other industries are actually bringing in some of this new technology.
Yes, that's right. I think technology is becoming so multifaceted that depending on your industry and the type of business problems that you're trying to solve, to apply like medicine, is you apply the right medicine for the symptoms or the condition. Same thing, you can't use one technology and expect it to do all the things that you want it to do. So it's really how we then reuse some of this. When we develop technology, we look at making it reusable, so that it's modular, it's reusable, and it forms a very strong foundational tech stack for multi-use cases. And more you see that the design of great products are in that form, where you can actually I only want this part, not the rest. So let me just take that and the use of APIs and try to interconnect. I think the other part is also about data, right? You can have all the best tech, but you have lousy, unclean, dirty data, it's no use. They're not going to make any sense of whatever. Even with ChatGPT, if you feed it with lousy information, I'm sure you'll get gibberish. Yeah.
Yeah, rubbish in equals rubbish out.
Exactly.
Still can't get away from that. So actually, I mean, let me just ask you a very simple question, and I'm sure the answer might be a little bit more complex. But I mean, what new technology are you most excited about looking at the near-term future? I mean, you mentioned ChatGPT a few times.
I think definitely, AI has been around for the longest time. Since I was a university student, like 20 over years ago, it's been around, right? Neural networks and stuff like that. In terms of technology, there's really the AI part that I have always been interested in, because I think that's just going to help us make better decisions, more take away some of the heavy processing that that computational power is useful for. And many times I think you are always wanting to do decisions, right? So decision making has always been kind of the roadblock, like what data do I need to make decisions? And you don't have the luxury of time. So AI, I think, can help in these areas. The other part that I'm very passionate about is also cybersecurity. I know it's one of those defense stuff. Defense in terms of our cyber resilience in protecting, our intellectual property as well as our platforms and solutions. It is such a area that people don't spend a lot of time. They don't think about it. They don't want to invest in it. They just think it's okay, as long as nothing happens to us, there's no leakage, they don't want to think about it. But I would say the companies that are resilient and companies who really outperform their competitors, one of the things they do very well fundamentally is not neglect the cyber resilience part. Because you spend millions and millions of dollars building great technology for your customers and partners, the last thing you want is to have a defaced page or my credit card details are gone, right? The trust, as I mentioned earlier, right from the start, even trust with your teams is important, but even more important with your customers and partners, isn't it? So I think that is those things. I started off my career as a software engineer, so I love actually, I miss doing coding, honestly, going back to those days where you can just put on your headset, don't talk to me, I'm just going to write my beautiful code and see it working. I would say that I do play with some of the new languages, just to make sure that I don't get too rusty, and also try out some of these new components that are out there, or build some mobile apps. But technology, as I said, is so interesting. It's so multifaceted. Mostly to do what I want it to do, right? What do I want to automate in my own life? Which hopefully that kind of give you a little bit of insight into the kind of new tech that I go after. Yeah.
No, that's great. Thanks for that answer, Sharon. I mean, there's a lot of things you actually bring up, and I think it's very interesting you actually bring up security there, and also, I mean, how we actually have to embed security in those new products, those new services, those new innovations that we're actually coming up with. Again, an area that sometimes gets forgotten. So, I mean, looking forward now, I mean, we're seeing all this, the generative AI coming out, and it's all over the news as to how it's going to, as you mentioned, pass the bar exams, pass medical exams, and there's going to be X million jobs lost through to this. But some of the things that it is starting to do is to really challenge the boundaries as to where we see the technology, where technology can actually be deployed. So, I mean, how do you think about, I mean, you mentioned use cases before, but when we talk about use cases, they're typically things that are already sort of happening today. How do you actually look at maybe doing something different, sort of the breakthroughs, the real sort of inventiveness, innovation?
Yeah, you do actually have to spend time thinking about this. And I usually would just interview people and talk to people about, so one of the digital transformation that we're trying to do is from a government to business perspective. How do we deliver better digital services to businesses to help them to grow, internationalize, and then in the end, as a result, boost our economy, right? And whenever I think about that, I will talk to people who own businesses or companies, and hear where are their pain points, because with technology, there's nothing that you can't do. So then what is the problem? And many times you hear that it is really down to having the right skill sets, building the expertise within, or solving some really fundamental inefficiencies within how department to department, pass information, or how do they actually operationalize their work better, right? As you said, this is still very much the now, like, yeah, these are the issues now, but what about in the future? And what gets me excited is also how do we wow our stakeholders, right? And so to be able to kind of dream big on what is it that if I can just close my eyes and and then press a button and everything gets done perfect, that's awesome. I think the problem is many people or companies are not very clear about where they want to go, and that's always the challenge, the destination, because there's so many moonshots, or too many moonshots that they're trying to achieve, where you kind of come down to, are we able to execute that feasibly? So as a rule of thumb for me and my team, right, I think we don't go beyond 2 to 3 years. Okay, and then there's of course the moonshot for 5 years and 10 years, but that really has to take into the hype cycle, as we talk about just now, the hype, what are the emerging technologies? Before 5G and IoT and sensors came into the picture, or robotics came into the picture, there were already such capabilities that certain industries are using. Like, for example, a lot of the factories, the manufacturing, right, for their goods assembling, and the food industry as well, they are using a lot of this, even for DHL, and they're using robotic clusters and so forth. I think that's because they are also very clear about where are the inefficiencies and how to move that notch up 3 times. So I would say that I will always start from being very clear about the to-be state, and then whatever that state is, try and dream bigger beyond that. So for government to business digital services, we also talk to other countries as well. I mean, I talk to other country leaders to just find out my counterparts in other countries to see what are you thinking of. I said, oh wow, actually I found out that Service New South Wales in Australia, they have really kind of done some great things, in terms of delivering one experience for their citizens, where they through their mobile they can do almost anything and everything with the government. I think if you talked to me 5 years ago, I would say that nothing is impossible, but the fact that they've actually been able to conceptualize and deliver it and see the value, the immediate feedback that citizens can give to government, that yeah, this policy is 5-star, I love it, it helps me. I think simple things like that is so transformational. So we should think more along those lines, and I think continuous learning from our peers helps crystallize some of these plans that people have. And I would say we will not say, oh, you know what, I'm very clear 5 years later, this is what I'm going to do. It's very difficult. So we just have to iterate as well. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting, that constant need to sort of reiterate and almost redefine what that to-be state looks like, but also sort of focus on that short near term, that sort of 2 to 3 years, which is where you can actually sort of, I suppose, predict more what's actually going to be delivered, and also predict more what people are going to be looking for. And also, as you mentioned, that need to actually communicate both with those outside of the industry, but the customers, the citizens, and just get that feedback, so to understand what they're actually looking for.
Yeah, like what works, what does not. So you don't actually have to go through the learning yourself. It's costly. Yes.
Fantastic. Sharon, that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much for talking to us today and giving your guidance on leadership, digital change, and new technology adoption. It's been fascinating to listen as to how you actually manage these topics. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
And thanks everybody for watching this episode. If anybody's got any questions, comments, please drop a note to me on LinkedIn. I'm Chris Holmes, Editor at Large for CIO here in ASEAN.